Switching around here, Amy Hutzel, who is the Deputy Executive Officer of the Coastal Conservancy, will be introducing the three speakers that we have. And we're really, really excited about the fact that the Conservancy funded this research. It's very, very helpful in our collaborative work with the Coastal Conservancy. And there's Amy here right now.
Great.
Into our presentation.
Thank you.
Again, with this, we'll ask you to hold the questions until the end.
Okay. Well, good morning, Chair Bochco and commissioners. Thank you so much for having the three of us here today to present this work. We're really excited and enthusiastic to present recent research supported by the State Coastal Conservancy or the Resources Legacy Fund on Californians' attitudes about the coast, and particularly attitudes about coastal access and barriers to access for Californians to get to the coast and enjoy it. And I would just say, I think this is, going to be a little more positive than the previous presentation, but I think there's a really, which was important. I think there's a really direct connection in terms of the future of the coast really relying on Californians' regard for the coast and their connection to the coast. So I think what we're presenting, has direct tie-ins to what we are going to be doing related to sea level rise and coastal erosion. So we have three presentations. Adam Probalski from Probalski Research will be giving the first presentation. For the Coastal Conservancy, he conducted 6 focus groups throughout California and a statewide poll. And we'll mostly be hearing about the statewide poll that he did on coastal access issues. Probalski Research does a wide array of research for various entities, from Restore Hetch Hetchy to Lennar to City of Newport Beach. And then we'll be hearing from John Christensen, a professor at UCLA, who, along with Phil King from San Francisco State University, did a series of intercept surveys of users of Southern California beaches, along with some studies of Instagram and their relationship to parks and coastal sites, and a statewide poll as well, using a different methodology. And I will be presenting the third presentation on behalf of our consultants from Sustaneer. So Menka Sethi and William Riggs couldn't be here today. I'll be giving their presentation related to the availability of lower cost coastal accommodations. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam, but I do really want to thank Susan Hanch and Linda Laughlin and Madeline Cavalieri, I hope I'm saying that correctly, for coordinating with us on all this research. And this research, I think, is really going to inform the work both of the Coastal Conservancy and the Coastal Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy, Chair and Commissioners. Thanks for the opportunity to present our results. This presentation is actually fairly long, but we'll keep moving it quickly. The full report on results is about that thick and is certainly available to you, but we want to give you kind of an overview of the research we did. A precursor to this telephone survey statewide was, as Amy mentioned, 6 focus groups throughout the state that gave us some real rich understanding of how people relate to the coast and helped us devise the survey itself. And I'll maybe reference it a couple times in the process. The video of those focus groups are certainly available also to you. It's maybe not everybody wants to look through those hours and hours of video, but it's certainly available. So with that, I'll learn how to use the clicker here, forward. Methodology, real quick, statewide telephone survey, live interviewers talking to live respondents. There were we talked to people both on their landlines and their cell phones, which is important because the National Institute of Health bizarre why they track it, but they track cell phone usage in the United States, and half of American households now are cell phone only. And then when you look at certain demographics, such as ethnic groups or younger people, the number is really high, even higher. We offered this survey both in English and Spanish. Started every interview in English, but if somebody asked to speak Spanish or clearly had a language barrier, we switched. So I'll go quickly through the demographics. This just shows who we talk to and what the demographic makeup of the state is. Going quickly to this, if you can zoom in on it, shows you the points of where all the respondents were throughout the state. Just kind of interesting representation. Obviously, in the major population areas, the Bay Area and Southern California, you have the concentration of respondents. Moving to the top issues, we asked this question, what's the most important issue facing your community today, to everyone, not necessarily because you folks care or have a purview over public safety necessarily, but to get people engaged and talking to us. Also, for your purposes, coastal issues really aren't on this list. So as much as everyone in this room really cares specifically about that and beaches, and it's not top of mind for most Californians. And that's just relevant to understand and in relation to the policy making that you do. We're going to go through this sort of in an emotional sense and showing people's connection to the coast in California, and then getting into much more practical purposes. So for instance, the first question we have here, California beaches are clean and safe places to visit. We asked that question. Do you agree or disagree? Really high number, 79% agree that it's a clean and safe place to visit. Moving to the personal importance of the coast to people, 89% say it's personally important to them. Again, very high numbers. We kind of put that in the puppies and kittens category of people really getting excited about what we're talking about, and impressive numbers. Even when I'm not at the coast, I have a connection to it, a strong connection to it. 75 or 76%, we round up, say they do. Those are strong numbers from a marketing perspective, theoretically. Looking at it, breaking down, we only call out some of the demographics that we think are interesting, but certainly they're all available to everyone. Latinos and white respondents have a little higher connection to the coast when they're not there. So we thought that was interesting to point out. People of all backgrounds are welcome at the coast. We asked if people agree or disagree. 94% agree. And I'll reference our focus groups here. In the focus groups, I made the attempt, without specifically talking about discrimination, trying to get out from people whether they didn't feel comfortable, or they didn't feel that everyone, every ethnic group, every age group, every gender, or everyone was welcome there. And only one person said, I felt uncomfortable, and it was a racial scenario. So this really shows that everybody, or the vast majority, 94%, feel like this is a place for them, and there isn't a large discrimination at the coast. Familiarity with the beaches and amenities there, 82%. Again, from a marketing perspective, it's not like you have to do a lot of education work. People in California know. And then we want to get into this, kind of continue this emotional connection and memories. If you went to the coast as a child, as a kid on a field trip, do you have fond memories of that? 40, or basically 50% say they do have fond memories, which we think is a pretty big number. And then if you look at that broken down by age group, it turns out younger people have better memories of being at the coast as a kid in a field trip. Not necessarily surprising, but still strong numbers from every age category in California. Looking at it from a ethnics perspective, Latinos and Asians have a better recollection of having an experience at the coast as a kid. How often do California residents visit the coast? Well, the first metric we look at is when was the last time you went to the coast in California? And a full 70% of respondents say they've visited the coast within the last year. So that's a pretty strong number we expect. looking at it from a perspective of your kind of coastal zones, Central Coast says they go, the most often within the last week. Just kind of interesting breakdown there. But then you ask it in a slightly different way. How often do you generally go to the coast? And the highest answer is 38% at 1 year, once per year. But clearly you've got big chunks of people going on a monthly basis and even more often. Traveling to the coast, we wanted to identify, this is kind of that barriers section, or the real problems with people getting there. So we say transportation to the coast in California is convenient and affordable. 63% agree with that statement. And obviously there's a quarter of the respondents who disagree, so there's certainly some issue to be addressed there. And if you look at it based on income, basically every income category says it's convenient and affordable to get to the coast. No real major variation there. Arriving at the coast, essentially parking at the coast, 54% agree that parking is convenient and generally available at the coast. However, there's a significant chunk of people, 38%, who say no, and again, a place to potentially address. We'll kind of call this sort of thing homework. If there's something that people aren't happy about, you can maybe figure out how, from a policy perspective, to fix it. Parking is affordable, specifically talking about cost about parking. 63% agree that it's affordable. You've got 27% who disagree. And we looked at that based on all the different, some different demographics, one of which is income. And although 25,000 and less income, household income, says it's affordable the least number of times, the lowest percentage-wise, all income levels say it is affordable. We ask about experience once you get to the coast. What are you doing when you get there? And as you can see, it's a pretty long list of things. We categorize the open-ended responses, and these are sometimes, we find them interesting to read. You can actually see the verbatim responses of what people say. We categorize them. So obviously the top is walking and hiking, and then water activities, and it cascades down. There were a few people that said that they pick up trash when they're at the beach. We want to applaud them. And a couple people that said they fly a kite. But essentially, you can kind of see what folks really kind of engage in. And I think it is interesting to read their actual verbs and their words. One thing that came from the focus groups was this idea that there ought to be more things to do when you get to the coast. And so we wanted to see if that bore out, if that played out on a statewide level. And it turns out no, that a vast majority, 65%, say, no, we're okay. We don't agree with that statement. We kind of like it the way it is. Now, I think it's important to note the 32% that agree and want something more once they're there. And we can kind of see who those people are. It turns out Latinos are the only demographic or ethnic group that specifically say they do want something more at the coast to do when they get there. And then looking at it also from an income perspective, not by a great margin, but those who make in a household $25,000 or less also are looking for some more activation of the coast, something else to do there when they get there. Coming to the idea of staying overnight at the coast, we did some pretty extensive questioning on this, and you'll hear some other research on the subject. First, do you stay there when you get to the coast? 58% say no, that they don't. Obviously, a big chunk still do, but the majority don't. And then we represent that data illustrated here. In the bluish area are the folks that do stay at the coast when they go, and the orange color is the ones that don't stay at the coast when they go. And that's majority in that county grouping. So obviously we can break this down in a lot of different ways, but it's basically by county grouping area. So just kind of interesting representation of who shows up and stays over. So, staying over at the coast, we're looking at the different age categories. Only a majority of the seniors, 65 and older, say they stayed at the coast when they travel there, and only white respondents, residents, say, majority-wise, say they stay at the coast when they do go. And then if you look at the numbers broken down by income, there is a disparity there between lower income respondents who say they don't in significant number, almost 75%, and then looking at it kind of a break there, but essentially higher income earners. I don't think there's any kind of surprising numbers, but it is worth kind of having that data and being able to show it to people. So looking at the barriers to staying overnight, why is that potentially a problem? Financial reasons is number one. I mean, it's clearly the top issue. And then it kind of goes down from there. Busyness is the key. And if you look at busy at work and busy at school and busy at life in general, it's like 60% of people. Obviously, busyness is not necessarily something that the commission can address. So I think you can focus maybe more on the financial components. Where are you staying when you get to the coast? I found this data pretty interesting. With all the discussion and hype of shared housing and VRBO and Airbnb and all that sort of thing, only 5% of people say that that's their option for where they stay. Clearly, hotels still have the vast majority of the business, and it comes down from there. Camping grounds certainly are in the mix, and we'll kind of touch on that in just a minute. Looking at the possibility of a new concept, the idea that there would be some use of dorms near the coast or some other shared bathroom sort of accommodation, maybe a hostel kind of environment, youth hostel, not negative. So 59%, we call it 60%, we round up, say no, that's not an environment they want to stay in. Now, again, we've got 38% that say they would, so I think there's a possibility of addressing that with them. We looked at the numbers broken down by several different demographics. It turns out women are kind of very opposed to the idea of staying in this environment, more than men are. But looking at it from an age category, all age demographics do not favor this kind of environment. However, the youngest category are the least unfavorable toward the idea, or the most amenable to the idea. And then looking at it also from a income level, lower income people, I think have more of an affection for the idea, but still in the supporters, the people that say yes, are in the minority in all income categories. Looking at specific overnight accommodations, we asked the question, finding overnight accommodations in California coast is affordable. Do they agree or disagree? 45% disagree. A sizable chunk agree, and then there's certainly always the folks that just are unsure. It's not a part of their typical experience. So the plurality definitely says that it's not an affordable activity. Interestingly enough, Latinos respondents say in a significant plurality over those who disagree, say that it is affordable once they get to the coast to stay overnight. It's an interesting data to call out. And then looking at the numbers by income, no income bracket says, broadly income bracket says it's affordable to stay overnight at the coast. I think we got a bit mocked by the San Francisco Chronicle with a headline with the idea that people wanted to visit the coast a little bit more. It was a funny enough headline, but I think it's broader than just, do you want to go to the coast more? It's about engagement and access. So we asked the question, do you wish you could visit the coast more often? And 69% of respondents say yes, 30% say no, and so those are from a policy perspective, potentially a way of helping those people get there more often. Looking at it from a perspective of the numbers, Coastal 5 is within 5 miles of the coast, Coastal 10 is within 10 miles of the coast, and then everybody else is inland. I'd expect that people who live 20 miles from the coast probably don't think of themselves as inland, but that's the way we categorize it just to look at it. So everyone, wherever they live in proximity to the coast, says they wish they could visit more, majority. And then, looking at this again, this idea of why don't you visit the coast more often? This is where that number comes up. The number one reason is they're too busy, 60% with school work or in general, and so and then even down from this, so something again you can't address. Distance and is also something you can't address, but ability to get there and transportation and things like that are potentially things we can talk about and address. Which leads me to the next steps, or kind of the challenges and potential solutions. The first is that concern over transportation and getting there. And I'm not a transportation expert, but I certainly work with a lot of government agencies, and so the idea of some sort of partnerships with transit authorities and even private enterprise to move people from where they are, where they live, where they work to the coast is certainly a possibility from a policy perspective. And then from a cost perspective of staying overnight, whether that's growing the number of rooms and accommodations or preserving the market that's there today are certainly two things that can be considered from a policy perspective. The last thing I'll say is this this broad expectation based on the data that even when people aren't at the coast, experiencing the coast, or using the coast in the sense that we might individually think using the coast really is. Californians really appreciate it, and the next step from that, we do a lot of work for local government, for cities and other local agencies. When they get data like this, with this high number of support and appreciation and affection for something, they're usually in the business of raising taxes. So and having the credibility with their constituents to do that, raise revenues in some way. You are definitely in that category. I might be speaking out of turn here, but if there was ever any desire to raise revenues, you've got essentially largely the support of California in that sort of endeavor. With that, I'll pass it along and be around for questions after.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about our research with you this morning. Waiting for this to come up. We conducted a beach intercept surveys last summer, and then a poll in the fall, and there's some very interesting parallels in this work with Adam's research. I want to start. I know it's not. I know I don't need to say this to you all, but of course our research is framed by the knowledge that the California coast belongs to all of us. It's in the Constitution, it's in the Coastal Act, it's in the work that you all do at the Coastal Commission, the work that is done at the California State Coastal Conservancy, and that really, I think, is the big frame for all that we do. Like Adam's poll and the focus groups conducted earlier this year, our statewide poll in the fall found that Californians love the coast. Between 83 and 94% of Californians, that's represented by these varying colors on the map and in the regions that in our poll, say the condition of our ocean and beaches is important to them personally. The darker colors represent a higher percentage of voters in each region, but these are vast majorities. This replicates work that was done by the PPIC about a decade ago. This is very, very consistent love for our coast, and it's true across all demographic groups. We found this is similar sentiment across income levels and across race and ethnicity and gender, and no real significant differences across those. Whoops, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing here. So we, as I mentioned, we conducted beach intercept surveys at 11 beaches in Southern California, from Ventura Pier in the north to Doheny in the southern part of Orange County, with 1,146 beachgoers. These dots on the map represent where all of those people came from to those different beaches. And what we found was that a couple of interesting things we found is that the beach, the demographics of people at the different beaches varies significantly and in some interesting ways. If these are from north to south, from Ventura Pier to Doheny, and if you just look at Dockweiler there in the middle, my favorite beach in Los Angeles, that, as you all know, under the takeoff path from LAX. It's a very, very diverse beach. Everybody in LA is there, and if you compare that to Doheny in Orange County, with the blue being white visitors, you can see that the ethnic composition of the beaches in California does vary, as does the economic demographics of visitors to the beaches. Again, if you look at Dockweiler there in just below Santa Monica and compare that to Doheny, you can see that Dockweiler is visited much more by diverse lower income residents. Interestingly, Santa Monica Beach is, which is only a few miles away, is very, very close to the statewide demographics of California. But while the composition of the visitors to the beaches is different for probably very complex reasons having to do with the surrounding communities, with historical patterns of visitation, and other factors where people feel comfortable, we found that the primary reasons for why people visit the beach is, again, common among all Californians at the beach. These are the people that we interviewed at the beach. There's no significant variation across economic demographics or ethnic demographics, and some very minor variations by age. People come to the beach to relax and enjoy the scenery, and so that their children can have a place to play. And it drops off, it drops off after that. People come for different reasons, to swim or wade or walk or surf, and then a lot of other activities enjoyed by a lot of people. But the significant things is that everybody comes to the beach to enjoy the scenery or relax, have a place for their kids to play. Showing you some of the Instagram images that we harvested from California beaches and parks in the coastal zone. And when they get there, these are scaled and the bottom is what people say is the most important characteristics of the beaches when they get there. When they get there, they want clean sand and clean water. They want some basic amenities like trash cans, restrooms, parking nearby, and then it drops off. And interesting, there's these interesting corroborations with Adam's work. At the top of that chart is whether it's important for them to see people of their own ethnic background, and it's not that important to them. The beaches are. They're democratic spaces here in California, and anecdotally, we interviewed folks who we surveyed, and we have a video on the interactive version of this report on our website. Where we talk to people who come to the beach because they want to see everybody. They want to see all of California there. So again, how important is the coast to you personally? I showed this to you earlier, and the important things that people want. How often do we visit the coast? This shows the variation of people who visit several times a year or more. As you can see, this goes from the lighter color is about 41%, and the darker color is about 70. The darkest color is about 74%. So inland Californians, particularly in the Central Valley, visit less often than others. Part of this research is, of course, to understand the obstacles for people and the barriers for people visiting the coast. And in our statewide poll, we asked people about 4 perceived obstacles to coastal access, and these are how they're ranked with limited options for affordable parking being about 78%, saying it's a problem. Affordable overnight accommodations, about 75%. Public transportation, 68%. And public access to the coast overall, 62. Public transportation 68, and public access to the coast 62%. Now, we used the Beach Intercept survey to do what is called a travel cost model to probe more deeply on the economic factors, the cost barriers to visiting the coast, and we found that the average day trip to the coast, this is a very standard model used in recreation economics, has a total value of $36.74, with the travel costing about $22.09, not including any expenses at the beach, leaving what my economist colleague Phil King would say is a surplus of $14.65. Now, that's for, that's an average for the people who are at that beach, and I wouldn't want to focus too closely on any one number, but these numbers begin to triangulate and corroborate each other. I mean, so to suggest that if the parking and potentially the other expenses are more than $14.65, the average Californian, so 50% of Californians, the median and below, might decide not to take that trip. Not being an economist, I think we sometimes aren't just completely rational like this, and we come to the coast because we love it so much, even if it's not, a completely rational economic decision. But I think these are important numbers because they begin to corroborate other research that you have done at the Commission and the Conservancy has done. Now, if we look at overnight trips, we found that the average overnight trip of 4 nights had a total value of $605.05, with travel costing $194.41, not including lodging. Now, if you divide, that leaves a surplus of $410.64, and if you divide that by 4, you have about $102 left for accommodations, which again is not a number I would focus on too closely, but it begins to corroborate a lot of the other information about what is really affordable overnight accommodations. We all know that it's very hard to find a place to stay on the coast for just over $100, especially with the number of rooms, this from the California Coastal Commission study, with more economy rooms closing over the last 3 decades than all other kinds of rooms categories combined. So our recommendations in our report, I know we shared copies with you, include focusing legislative and executive branch attention on the coast, changing the narrative on coastal access to be more inclusive. A lot of times the narrative is still about the last 100 feet to the coast, and that's super important, and you all have been doing a lot of work on that we address in our report and online. But we need to change the narrative to include these other factors if we're going to continue to have access for all on the coast. And that practically includes increasing the supply of low-cost overnight accommodations, enhancing public transportation options, recognizing the importance of affordable parking and perhaps the transparency of parking prices so that people also understand what they're paying for in day use fees and parking. And then supporting groups that are changing the culture of the coast, because we know that that's very important to groups like Brown Girl Surf up in Oakland and Outdoor Outreach down here in San Diego, and others that are doing terrific work bringing kids to the coast. And from Adam's research, we know how important that is as well across their lifetimes. And what's shown here in the background is a representation using Instagram photos that we harvested from every single park in California. The yellow ones are inland, and the green ones are all the parks and beaches, public beaches, more than 1,000 up and down the coast of California that are in the coastal zone. And so you can see from this how important the coast is a crucial part of our park system, not just the third that is in state parks, but all of the other more than 1,000 public parks. And what's really crucial about this, and really kind of underlined by the earlier presentation, as Amy remarked on sea level rise and climate change, is that to have a new generation passionate and engaged for the coast, as so many people here in the room and you all have been for decades, and we need to make sure that we protect and open up that access for all. And I think, it's especially underlined with those challenges that Mike Jones outlined. I was the senior editor on a report called Bending the Curve, 10 Scalable Solutions for Carbon Neutrality and Climate Stability that involved 50 researchers from around the UC system. And there is a realistic pathway to stabilizing our climate, and but it's very clear that both for that to happen and to continue to happen, not just here in California, but around the world as is necessary, we're going to have people passionate and engaged about it, and to deal with the challenges that are coming on our coast, we'll have to have that. The biggest variable in all of these models is what people decide to do. So thank you very much.
So Amy Hutzel will finish up with the research on accommodations.
Great, thank you. Yes, so the State Coastal Conservancy, we contracted Sustaneer, Minka Sethi and Dr. William Riggs to do a lower cost coastal accommodation analysis and create a data set of coastal accommodations. Let's see if I can figure this out. Forward. Yay. So just to lay the groundwork, and I won't go into this in great detail, but we ended up using $112 a night or $123 a night in the summer as the definition of lower cost overnight accommodations. And that number, those two numbers came by looking at what is 75% of the 2015 California average daily rate from the Smith travel research data. And I'll just go back to that for a second. I think that it aligns pretty closely with what they found in the economic modeling. So there, we also looked geographically at accommodations within the coastal zone and 1 mile from the shoreline buffer. So basically, this is all within a mile of the coast. And if you look just at hotels and motels, which does include B&Bs, like official B&Bs, not short-term rental, Airbnb sort of things, cottages and hostels, then you find there are just over 56,000 rooms total in that 1 mile band. 7,400 of them, or 14%, fall below the 112 maximum daily rate. So about 14% of our hotel motel rooms are lower cost overnight accommodations. I just want to point out that the Sustainier data set is larger than the Smith Travel Research data set. Smith Travel Research does not include facilities with less than 10 rooms. So we were also getting at the smaller facilities along the coast. And you can break this down by county. A couple little anomalies to point out. The Marin numbers include a hostel. So the reason why Marin has 81% lower cost coastal rooms is there is a large hostel within that area. And the San Francisco numbers, we did just update those. So at this point, there are 164 total coastal rooms in San Francisco. 54 are lower cost, which is 33%. So another thing to point out is, I mean, Sustainier created this data set last year, and there is constant flux in the market. Hotels, motels, they shut down, they change, they temporarily close. So, you know, we can't take these numbers as like these are the, you know, this is the permanent data set. And I just also wanted to say that this data set can be sliced and diced and presented in different ways. So, you know, I understand that, you know, there are differences between a hostel and a hotel. We can pull out the different types of facilities in this data set. And then we also looked at the same information adding in campgrounds, so both RV and tent campsites. So if you add in those, then there are almost 65,000 total units, which is 9,000 more than the hotel motel data. So basically there's 9,000 campsite units on the coast. And that does boost up the affordability or the lower cost accommodation percentage to 26%, because basically all of those would fall within the 112 maximum daily rate. So 17,000 units are lower cost. And again, you can look at that breakdown by county. And again, the San Francisco numbers are just a little wrong. And then Sustainier also did a distribution analysis. So basically the ratio of the lower cost accommodations relative to lower income Californians. So looking at households below 80% AMI within 150 miles of the coastal zone in each area. So with that, this is that analysis with just the hotel motel, which includes, again, hostels, B&Bs, cottages. So you can see Bay Area and Central Coast have the lowest ratio, looking at it this way. If you add in the campsites, then you know, it dramatically increases that ratio in the North Coast and the Central Coast. And in this case, it's the Bay Area and Southern California where the ratios are the lowest. And with that, we are done with our presentations and would love to take any questions from you. And as you could probably tell, I'm not an expert at the analysis that Sustainier did, but I can do my best to answer questions about this.
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions from the dais? Commissioner Cox.
This is, I guess, a question to Adam in the survey that he did. I was just kind of curious, when you showed the slide that was talking about the percentage of people that wanted more things to do at the beach, did they have any specific things that they listed that they felt that they were lacking or
So,
wanted to see?
based on budgetary restrictions, we didn't have a follow-on question to that question in the survey, but we did do some discovery work in the focus groups on that subject, and it was kind of interesting information, not representative necessarily of California, but it came up a couple times that there was this idea that they wanted kind of a, for lack of a better way of saying it, a kind of a club or resort atmosphere when they got to the coast. They wanted the setup. They wanted the beach chairs. They wanted the umbrella. They wanted a place to get a drink and some food that was reasonable priced. I think creating that environment is what five-star hotels do on the coast generally. I think it'd be hard to create some of those things for a modest price, but those are things that were talked about. This idea that basically just come with the kids and some diapers and you'd be fine at enjoying the coast because everything would just be there for you.
The other question I had was in the information you had put out here. It said 58.3% of Californians never stay overnight at the coast, and 73.5% of the Hispanic Latinos never stay overnight, and yet the figures that I recall is that the Hispanic Latinos felt that the costs of accommodations were the majority of them felt that the costs of accommodations were reasonable.
So the way of potentially looking at that is that they don't choose to go, but if they did, they would find the cost acceptable to them. And we can dig more into that particular question if you want, and kind of identify if that's an older, if the Latinos we surveyed and the respondents were older Latinos who perhaps were more moneyed or something like that, or maybe look at it based on geography to see where they lived and give you kind of an answer to that. But we can definitely look into that and give you some more detail.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Turnbull.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for bringing this research to our attention. I know with Mr. Christensen, you and I have talked at length on some of these issues. I think it's particularly important as the commission starts to look at environmental justice and look at these access issues as something that relates to issues pertaining to the idea that the coast belongs to all of us, and trying to figure out ways that we can make sure that that becomes a reality for folks, and removing barriers to that. One of the questions I had was, and maybe this is a question for all three panelists, is there an effort to do a study on folks who never have been to the beach? So one of the things that strikes me as interesting, while this data reveals a lot, one of the things that I think we've been particularly moved by is when we have students, for example, come and testify who've been through one of our education programs or the great programs of the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, where they have these overnight trips, and you hear these very moving testimonies from young children who have seen the sunset for the first time, who've been camping for the first time on the beach. And then you often wonder, do they get a chance to go back to the beach? What were the obstacles or barriers that prevented the families of the children from bringing them to the beach in the first place? And so while I appreciate these studies, it seems like one of the targeted populations that we should be looking at are those populations of folks who have never experienced the beach. And so I don't know if anybody wants to take that on. Thank you.
Yes, I think that we can see some interesting information about that from the statewide polls. So if I'll give you, a short answer for our poll. When we did our poll, we were only able to do about six. I think it was technically like 6.5 questions or something like that. And so we were able to ask the people who go to the beach less than once a year why they didn't go to the beach. And I think we could, similar information could be harvested from Adam's survey by looking at the people who don't go to the beach very often and look to answer some of those questions. I mean, what we found was that, again, for the most part, the answers were similar across the different demographics, and had to do with not enough time. My friends and family don't go to the beach. I mean, we do know that people in the Central Valley and people who of lower income go less often. We did find the only really kind of very significant difference that jumped out at us from that question. And I want to be a little bit cautious here, because once you get down to these kinds of, even with a statewide survey that has statistical significance, once you get down to these small samples, I would just say that, I think it's very suggestive and interesting and important to look at, but we'd want to be careful about it. We'd want to do some more research, where the sample size of is big enough, which would mean that the whole sample would have to be the sub-sample size is big enough. Sorry to be so wonky, but the sample would have to be 3 times as big in order to get a representative sample of those people who aren't going to the beach. But one thing that did jump out to us was that among African Americans, it was, again, it's a small sample, but significantly more said they don't go to the beach because they don't know how to swim. And I think, we hear that from, this echoes the literature on public swimming pools and public beaches and public swimming pools, and the discrimination and different experiences that people have had or not been able to have, that those are really important for us to look at and consider in more depth. And I think that, some of the programs like Outdoor Outreach and Brown Girl Surf in the Bay Area are really working to address those questions. I mean, the work that Brown Girl Surf is doing up in the Bay Area is just, so inspiring to, as their director describes it, to make sure that the girls feel comfortable in the waves, feel comfortable in the water, feel that the coast and the ocean is theirs too, and they see themselves reflected there.
Just briefly, looking at the people we did talk to who don't visit or have barriers to visiting, just to reiterate, busyness was the number one reason, but transportation was another big one. So I think that's something that you can definitely look at, that subset of people who don't go, and figure out how to address to some degree. In the focus groups, we really, I think, only had 1 or 2 people who said they've never been. I think it was just one guy. It was actually in the Spanish-speaking, Spanish language focus group we had. That's in no way representative of any particular population, but it was just interesting that it was in that environment. He had been in California, I think, for a couple of years, or maybe even 3, and never went to the coast. And he lived in Ontario, was where the focus group was. So he lived in Inland Empire. Pretty darn close compared to the rest of the country to any kind of coastline, but still never made it there. And I think it was part financial and part it just wasn't a priority for him. And to follow on to what John was saying, the idea of researching statewide people who don't go to the coast, yes, you could potentially grow the respondent base by 3 times or so, or you could put a qualifier question on, have you been to the coast? And if you haven't, then you ask the questions to them about what we want to understand about their experience and why they don't go. that just increases the cost significantly because most of Californians don't qualify to answer those questions. So it's just another way. As much as I'd love to do 5 more polls for the Conservancy and the Commission, that's a question or 2 or 3 we could easily put on a statewide poll that we do. So I'd love some more ideas from you on that subject matter, and I'm happy to provide that data as a follow-on.
Just one more quick follow-up on that issue is one of the glaring kind of omissions that I saw here also was that there is not a mention of Native nations in the survey, and it may be that the challenge was getting a significant, a statistically significant number, but I think that, you know, particularly in the coastal area, because we have so many historic and cultural resources in the coastal zone, that I think that if we don't include something on that with respect to these surveys, I think that we're doing California a disservice.
Just to answer, obviously, Native Americans and who live in Native nations certainly were included in our research. I don't think we had a focus group that was close enough proximity to recruit from that community, although they weren't excluded. It's just what they're small in population. So the telephone survey certainly included them. Again, looking at the numbers, there'd be a very small number of respondents, but I think there's room for some focused research in that area.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Groom?
Thank you. Thanks very much to the Conservancy for doing this great work. We've been kind of grappling for the last couple of months with the cost of parking and the lack of parking, and one of the things that you did draw out was that more transportation is needed. But I thought I heard you say that about half of the people were not so concerned about the cost of parking. And we kind of hear the opposite in some of the hearings and some of the cases that we've had.
Commissioner, the answer is in our research, and I'll pull up the data for myself here. We made the statement parking is affordable at the California coast. 63% agree. You know, I think there's some reasons why data might be different than what you might generally be hearing, or even from other research tools that have been, research has been done. And, you know, this was a statewide survey of residents and was representative of the state. The calls and emails and other, you know, people reaching out to you may have we're representative of a subset of the different communities, and also I would urge, perhaps I didn't detail the information by geography, but if you look at it by geography, those numbers could be different as well, and you may be hearing specifically from one one area of the state versus northern part of the California where it's a little more abundant and more affordable.
Thank you.
Quickly, I mean, all of our findings and the breakdown of the tabs are also available on our website. You can look at this in depth. I mean, we did not find big geographic differences. There were sort of some subtle differences in geographies in answer to that problem. And again, I think you can use some of this information to kind of corroborate and triangulate. We asked the questions in different ways than Adam did. You know, so when we asked, because of the number of questions we could ask and so on and so forth, you know, was a limited options for affordable parking a big problem? 33% said yes. And so that's not that far away from the number that Adam found, and that 45% said it's somewhat of a problem. I mean, I think the other thing is and then when we talked with beachgoers though, again, I mean, use that number of the travel cost model. I mean, kind of gets you to what is that number that people consider around something that's, you know, affordable. But another important number to keep in mind is, you know, where we found at the beach that 90% of visitors drive to the beach. 3% took public transportation, 1% rode a bicycle, and 5% walked. We found that 2/3 of visitors prefer not to walk more than 3 blocks from transportation. Now, you might know, I mean, it's great when the Expo line opened and came to Santa Monica Beach, and a lot of people are using it and enjoying the beach, but it's just over 3 blocks from the beach. And so there may be an interim thing that's needed there. I mean, the issue here is, and nearly half of the people want to walk less than a block.
Right.
And that's partly because people show up, at least at these kinds of beaches in Southern California, with lots of gear. Their kids and lots of gear. They come to enjoy the scenery and relax and watch their kids play, right? So I think it's important, I mean, as much as we all, I think, public transportation is an important part of the solution, but it's also important to recognize what people are actually doing.
Thank you. I think one of the things that, we don't want to spend precious land on building parking lots. So I think one of the things that we're kind of exploring in San Mateo County, and maybe we could do it in a larger area, is finding available parking and using shuttle buses so that you transport more people out of one trip, but you also have a place for them to park that maybe is a community center that can, on Sundays, is available or something. But we're really kind of exploring that, and I'd like to maybe see if other parts of the state are exploring that as well. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and if they aren't, they should. Commissioner Brownsy.
Yes, I just had a question with respect to accessibility. One of the issues I know is people having access to the information about what's out there. So for instance, having a list of all the state-supported campgrounds, but also private campgrounds in certain areas, or a list that they could go to with respect that would list in the different regions the low-cost hotels. Because that, for families, I think those are kind of, very difficult searches, especially if you have limited time on a computer or just limited time because you're a working parent. And I was wondering if there was any interest or activity in that regard.
Yeah, so we did find in the statewide poll, I think it was 82% of Californians said they are familiar with the beaches and their amenities. They might not, have complete information though. In the focus groups, we did ask people how they got information about visiting the coast, and Google was the number one answer. And I think TripAdvisor came up as well. And social media, that's right, especially among younger people in the focus groups. And a couple people talked about movies and television. Like they see things in a movie or on TV, and they want to go visit that place. So that was kind of interesting in the focus groups, hearing how people got information. We didn't dive into it in the statewide poll. I do want to point out that the State Coastal Conservancy is in the process of developing an Explore the Coast web app, and we're working closely with Coastal Commission staff on that. So, we are releasing the app very soon. It has some content. The content needs to continue to grow and grow and grow over time, and we want to work with local agencies and nonprofits up and down the coast on filling this app with content, and then kind of studying how many people are using the app and whether it's helping them out in terms of finding places to stay, having information before they get to the coast. I think another thing we found in the focus groups, people, they want to know what to expect before they get their family, especially before getting kids to the coast. They want to know about the cleanliness of the water, the availability of clean restrooms. That came up a lot. So I think this will be something people will benefit from.
I'd also like to add that we do have the California Coastal Access Guide that has all that information. It's also web-based, and we're constantly dating that, and all that data is also, we gave to the Conservancy, and we work really closely with them. There are lots of ways we can improve it, but we're working on that continually.
I just interject a little notion of a note of caution, where this is, we have not researched this, but there's a group of us, Adam and I and colleague Phil King and others, researchers who are gathering later this month to talk about areas where there's gaps of research that we should really be addressing. And I think one of the concerns, particularly if you think about equity, is that we know with some of the precious cabins and campsites on the coast that as soon as they come available, they're gone. So there's certain people who are very good at knowing when these things happen and are able to get them, and and other people who might not have that access and to be able to move that fast. And we need to understand that better and think about it as we devise other solutions to make these opportunities more widely available to a more diverse population.
Thank you. Commissioner Vargas?
Thank you very much. And I have a million questions, but I'm not going to ask them because we'll be here all day. I'm just hoping that I can get a chance to maybe follow up with you all later on and maybe meet with you in person since you're based in UCLA, correct? Yeah. But I do have a couple of comments. First and foremost, thank you so much for performing this research and collecting this data. It might be the first time that we've ever done this, and I hope it's not the last. We've been struggling with how to deal with kind of this ever-evolving challenge of low-cost accommodations, and struggling in part because we see at the, as commissioners and as staff at this agency, we see anecdotally, project by project, place by place, development by development, what we see as a loss of this low-cost accommodations, but it's really hard to kind of act and do things in a holistic manner without having data. So it's my sincere hope that you continue to collect this on a yearly basis. For instance, I think you mentioned the number of what you consider low-cost accommodations to be about 14% of the current stock of available rooms along the coast. It'd be great to be able to track that, and maybe even, I don't know how easy this would be for you to do, but to go back retroactively so that we can see if there has been, a marked loss of low-cost accommodations through time, and certainly going forward, and that could help us in how we approach our planning and actions on each of these projects going forward. Also, would love to read more and learn more, and maybe it takes more research and diving into these things. Why do people go to places like Dockweiler and Doheny in Los Angeles? My guess is it's because of what your other data says, which is the amenities, the convenience that you find there. What are there? There's fire rings there. There's you can go barbecue. Latinos, we like to barbecue. We like to eat at the beach. I'd also like, there's a flip side there. Why are people maybe not going to, or are they not going to more isolated beaches, such as the beaches that you have in Malibu or Laguna? And I'd really love to maybe dive down and learn more about why people are concentrating, obviously, in places like Dockweiler and Doheny, and maybe not in these more remote places. I suspect the answer is because of the lack of amenities that are there. Not only that, but also, perhaps by design, folks are made to not want to go there, and those would be interesting subtleties to try and pore over and find data on. And again, last observation: all of this is incredible data to have, and as we start looking at designing a strategic plan for the next 5 years, it'd be great to consider all of this information and to learn from it and see if we can strategize ways to approach tackling some of these challenges in our strategic plan by using that data. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have a few public comments. Mandy Sackett, Ben McHugh, and I believe it's Nate Howard. If you could keep your comments to 1 or 2 minutes apiece, I'd appreciate it. We're a little behind today.
Okay, hi. Mandy Sackett, Surfrider Foundation California Policy Coordinator. Thank you for this necessary and informative discussion around coastal access. Surfrider Foundation considers beach access a universal right of all people. This belief drives our mission to secure that right for all people on every coast. We work to proactively bring people who might not otherwise get to experience the joy of the beach to the coast, and we work to ensure that the public continues to have a beach to enjoy. These efforts not only share the stoke, but are creating the next generation of coastal stewards, especially through supporting existing programs. For example, our San Francisco chapter participates in events with Oakland's Brown Girl Surf, and our West LA Malibu chapter volunteers with Stoke Share's One Watershed program. In fact, many of our 20 California chapters partner with groups working to enhance coastal opportunities and appreciation. These efforts also provide a chance to share information about the Coastal Act and its guarantee of beach access for all. As you well know, one of Surfrider's main policy priorities is on investigating impediments to beach access for inland and low-income communities, including both physical and psychological blocks at beach access points. We therefore continue to wholeheartedly support enforcement efforts by the California Coastal Commission to prevent wealthy property owners from effectively privatizing beaches by blocking access through means such as gates, illegal no trespassing signs, faked no parking markings. We also encourage you to implement both simple and complex fixes within the Commission's jurisdiction, everything from improved signage, guides, and coastal trails to maximizing parking and transportation and requiring low-cost overnight accommodations in order to better enable those unfamiliar with the coast to utilize them more easily and fairly. We continue to highlight problems preventing access and push for policy solutions at the Commission level. Commission outreach opportunities to partner with existing programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben McHugh?
Hello, Ben McHugh with Executive Director of Outdoor Outreach, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I'm a big admirer of the California Coastal Act. It makes me very proud to be a Californian. And at Outdoor Outreach, we provide ongoing programs and supports for over 1,600 youth a year here in San Diego County who are at a higher risk for school dropout, unemployment, homelessness, mental health issues, and involvement in the juvenile justice system. I think from the presentation that was given, it was really relevant that a trip to the beach is still seen as kind of a nice to have. And I want to give you another perspective in terms of through our work, how a trip to the beach can really be addressing critical community needs of the youth that we serve. And through our programs, kids are actually attending school at a higher rate, they're going to college at a higher rate, and their mental health is drastically improved. And so my recommendation for you, as you look at this coastal access issue, is really to look at how do you integrate coastal engagement into health and human services, schools, and public safety programs to really, elevate it from being a nice to have. And we actually have some photos here to queue up, and it looks from the photos like these are nice to have, but when you realize that these kids are, dealing with issues around homelessness, being foster youth, their parents' immigration status, and that through these programs they're able to do things and accomplish things they never thought they could do, it kind of changes the dynamic a little bit. And we're also, I have to note that we're a beneficiary of the Whale Tail program. Thank you very much, as well as the Coastal Conservancy's Explore the Coast program. And that while those environmental education and stewardship programs are incredibly valuable, and please don't stop those, there's also a critical need to engage with these other services. And as Supervisor Cox knows, there's a huge cost to the county for the mental health services that happen when you don't have those community supports that we can provide through coastal engagement programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Howard?
Good morning. My name is Nate Howard. I am the founder and executive director of Movement B, and our whole mission is to inspire young people to tell their story through creative expression, such as poetry, creative writing, and other platforms. What's so important about Movement B is we're focused on emotional intelligence. We realize that students on the DNF list, students who've been suspended or expelled, feel like they've been disconnected from the classroom. And so the work that we do is inspiring growth mindset strategies to engage them in helping them understand their story. And the cool thing is that we partner now with Outdoor Outreach to create the lesson plans to do these workshops out on the coast. We realize when students are learning outside of the classroom, a place where they felt like they've been failures, where they feel like they can't have success, that we can engage them in a better way by the coast. So teaching them activities like teamwork through kayaking, or teaching them perseverance when most of them feel like people like me never surf or never paddleboard. We're inspiring them to think outside the box. We're inspiring them to get out of their comfort zone. And it's so important for them to engage in these activities so that they can take that back into the classroom. I myself got connected to Outdoor Outreach while doing work with Movement B at the Monarch School, which serves students dealing with homelessness. And we realized what was happening to these students who felt like they didn't have a voice or they didn't have a story. When we took them out on a trip, such as paddleboarding, such as surfing, they were able to let free of everything that people have stereotyped them and labeled them to be, and let it all out there into the water. Literally becoming naked, becoming free in that sense, to be vulnerable to who they are outside of the school boundaries where they've been told that they're no good and that they can't do anything. So in this partnership with Movement B and Outdoor Outreach, we continue to do this work. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Back to staff. Any further?
I think my closing comment would be a bit of a plug for the whale tail plates, the license plates, and the tax checkoff, because a lot of these groups are funded through those programs, and we're in a lot of competition with many other license plates right now, and license plate sales have gone down because there's more plates to share. So if all of you in the audience and everyone online would buy a whale tail plate or add to the tax checkoff, all that money goes to these programs. So, thank you.
Thank you.